If you think child predators have it bad in court, think again. Actual justice for these lowest of the lows starts behind those iron gates. They're locked away in places where even the guards don't care. Overcrowded cells, rampant disease, scarce food, and constant violence turn survival into a daily fight. Today, we're diving into prisons so brutal that even the toughest criminals struggle to make it out alive. 1. Diyarbakir Prison. This massive, foreboding structure in southeastern Turkey is the Diyarbakir Prison, a place that has become synonymous with suffering and human rights abuses. The prison was established in 1980 as an E-type facility by the Ministry of Justice. E-type prisons in Turkey are designed to house inmates in dormitory-style wards, each accommodating multiple prisoners. This aims to facilitate rehabilitation through communal living and shared activities. However, the events following its establishment significantly altered its intended purpose. On September 12, 1980, Turkey experienced a military coup that led to widespread political upheaval. In the aftermath, Diyarbakir Prison was transferred to military administration, becoming known as the martial law military prison. During that era, Esat Oktay Yildiran, a Turkish military officer, was appointed as the governor of the prison. But Yildiran soon became infamous for his extensive use of torture against inmates. One of the primary torture techniques used was the application of electric shocks. Devices such as field telephones were repurposed to deliver high-voltage shocks to various parts of the body. Various forms of hanging were also employed. Prisoners were suspended in painful positions for extended periods, leading to dislocations, muscle tears, and severe circulatory issues. This method was designed to inflict maximum pain without leaving visible marks, making it difficult to document the abuse. Falaka, the beating of the soles of the feet, was another common practice. This method caused excruciating pain and could result in long-term damage to the feet, making it difficult for victims to walk. Sexual violence, including rape, was also systematically used as a tool of humiliation and control. Sleep and food deprivation were standard practices aimed at weakening the prisoners physically and mentally. Extended periods without sleep led to hallucinations, cognitive impairments, and heightened susceptibility to other forms of torture. Similarly, withholding food caused malnutrition, further debilitating the inmates. In some cases, the authorities resorted to torturing the relatives of prisoners in their presence. This method was used to exert psychological pressure, forcing detainees to comply or confess to crimes they may not have committed. The conditions in Diyarbakir Prison during this period were so severe that between 1981 and 1984, 34 prisoners lost their lives. You think that's horrifying? Imagine what happens when you're a child predator in this environment. It's no secret that such offenders are despised even among the worst of criminals. In Diyarbakir, being labeled as one of them likely means enduring not just the cruelty of the guards, but also the wrath of your fellow inmates. But what if you were among the very few lucky ones who were not on the receiving end of this torture? Well, you were still not in the clear. You see, torture alone didn't make this prison infamous. The facility was originally designed to accommodate 744 inmates. However, reports indicate that it often housed far more than its intended capacity. For instance, in October 1996, the Human Rights Commission of the Grand National Assembly of Turkey visited the prison and found that, despite a capacity of 650 at that time, it was accommodating 942 prisoners. The overcrowding led to inadequate access to basic necessities such as food, water, and medical care. Inmates were often forced to sleep in shifts due to a lack of beds, and sanitation facilities were insufficient for the number of prisoners, leading to the spread of diseases. Think Diyarbakir is awful? Wait until you hear about this next prison, which is 10 times worse. Klong Prem Central Prison. Located in Bangkok's Chatuchak district, the Klong Prem Central Prison houses thousands of inmates, including a significant number of foreign nationals. As you would have already guessed, overcrowding is a persistent issue here. Cells meant for a handful end up packed wall to wall. This means personal privacy is virtually non-existent. Inmates sleep on thin mats placed directly on the floor, packed so tightly that movement during the night is limited. The daily routine is rigid and monotonous. Inmates are awakened early in the morning, at around 5:30 a.m. By 6 a.m., prisoners are required to leave their sleeping quarters. The day continues with various activities, including work assignments, limited recreational time, and meals. At 5 p.m., inmates return to their sleeping quarters, followed by meditation and prayer time at 7 p.m. Lights out is enforced at 8 p.m., marking the end of the day. The food provided is often insufficient in both quantity and nutritional value, leading many prisoners to rely on money from relatives to purchase additional food from the prison canteen. canteen. However, not all inmates have this financial support, leaving them to endure constant hunger. Sanitation facilities are inadequate, communal toilets lack privacy, and access to clean water is limited. Inmates are responsible for cleaning their living areas, but with limited cleaning supplies, maintaining hygiene is a constant struggle. The prison clinic is often understaffed and lacks essential medications, leaving many inmates without proper treatment for their ailments. Anyhow, abuse by prison staff is disturbingly common in Prem Prison, adding another layer of suffering to an already unbearable existence. Inmates have recounted instances of physical punishment for minor infractions, such as talking out of turn or failing to follow orders promptly. Solitary confinement is used as a disciplinary measure, with prisoners placed in small, dark cells for extended periods. Shackling is also reported as a form of punishment. Inmates may have their hands and feet bound, restricting movement and causing significant discomfort. In some cases, prisoners are shackled for days or even weeks, leading to physical injuries such as bruises, cuts, and long-term musculoskeletal issues. Finally, there is forced labor, yet another punitive measure reported within Prem. Inmates are compelled to engage in strenuous labor, such as sewing, folding paper, or repairing shoes, often for meager compensation. Refusal or inability to perform these tasks can result in further punishment, including physical abuse or extended sentences. If you thought life at the Bangkok Hilton was brutal, it's nothing compared to what goes on at Rikers Island. Rikers Island. Spanning over 400 acres in the East River between the Bronx and Queens, this is one of the largest and most infamous correctional facilities in the United States. Its history, however, is riddled with controversy and problems. Named after Abraham Riken, who acquired the island in 1664, Rikers was purchased by New York City in 1884 for $180,000. Much of its expansion was achieved through convict labor, using landfill to increase its size to its current sprawling footprint. The first permanent jail here, however, the House of Detention for Men, was built in 1933. Over the years, additional facilities were constructed, making Rikers a complex of 10 jails. Nevertheless, over the years, countless reports have highlighted the inhumane conditions inside. Photos obtained by the New York Post in 2021 showed horrific overcrowding, with inmates crammed into tight spaces, lacking basic necessities. Inmates have reported being responsible for cleaning the facilities, often without proper equipment or support. This lack of sanitation has contributed to the spread of diseases within the prison. Additionally, the prison has faced significant staff absenteeism, leading to inadequate supervision and increased violence among inmates. The treatment of inmates at Rikers has been a major concern. Reports of physical abuse, neglect, and excessive use of solitary confinement have been widespread. In 2021, at least 16 inmates died while incarcerated at Rikers, highlighting the severe conditions and lack of adequate care. These deaths have been attributed to various factors, including violence, medical neglect, and suicide. But guess what? Reports indicate that when inmates are in dire need of assistance, guards may not intervene effectively, leaving prisoners vulnerable. The lack of oversight has allowed gangs to proliferate within the prison walls, leading to increased violence and a culture of fear among inmates. A federal monitor's report highlighted that violence, staff shortages, and overall dysfunction at Rikers were not improving. The report emphasized that the jails remained unstable and unsafe for both inmates and staff, with the first few months of 2022 revealing persistent instability. This environment is particularly perilous for vulnerable inmates, including those convicted of crimes against children. Such individuals are often targeted by other prisoners, facing heightened risks of assault and abuse. Nonetheless, one of the recent and most notable cases is that of Caliph Browder. In May 2010, the 16-year-old was accused of stealing a backpack and arrested in the Bronx, New York. Despite his insistence on innocence, he was charged with robbery, grand larceny, and assault. His bail was set at $3,000, an amount his family could not afford, leading to his remand to Rikers Island. Browder's pretrial detention extended over 3 years, during which he faced numerous court delays and postponements. The prosecution offered multiple plea deals, all of which he rejected, maintaining his innocence. During this period, Browder spent approximately 800 days in solitary confinement, a practice known to have severe psychological effects, especially on adolescents. In June 2013, the charges against Browder were dismissed, and he was released from Rikers. However, the prolonged isolation and harsh conditions had taken a significant toll on his mental health, and on June 6, 2015, Caliph Browder died by suicide at his mother's home. Rikers is so infamous that even New York City wants it gone. There have been ongoing discussions about its closure and the implementation of reforms. In 2019, New York City officials announced plans to close Rikers Island by 2026, replacing it with smaller borough-based jails. This decision was driven by the desire to address the inhumane conditions and systemic problems within the facility. However, progress has been slow, and the prison continues to operate under the same harsh conditions. Guantanamo Prison. They say prisons like Diyarbakir are nightmares, but they pale in comparison to Guantanamo Bay. Here, the rules of humanity don't just bend, they break. The journey into Guantanamo starts with its gates. Enter them, and it feels like a checkpoint that feels like the line between the world you know and a grim, tightly controlled void. Every corner has watchtowers, heavily armed guards, and layers of barbed wire. But what lies inside isn't just walls and cells. It's the stories and the scars of the inmates who've endured it. Some have been infamous terrorists, others innocent men trapped in the wrong place at the wrong time. And then there are the methods, ones that make even the harshest prisons in the world seem mild. Solitary confinement isn't just a punishment here, it's a way of life. Prisoners are locked in small, windowless cells for 22 hours a day, allowed out only for brief and heavily monitored exercise. Communication with the outside world is almost non-existent, and mental breakdowns are common. What's even more chilling is the system itself. In its early days, Guantanamo used Camp X-Ray, an outdoor cage-style setup that resembled something more suited for animals than humans. Inmates knelt on gravel, bound and blindfolded, enduring hours in the blazing sun or freezing rain. The world reacted with outrage, and Camp X-Ray was shut down, replaced by facilities like Camp Delta and Camp 5, which were slightly more modern, but no less oppressive. Detainees here face enhanced interrogation techniques, a sanitized way of describing what many consider torture. Waterboarding, beatings, sleep deprivation, you name it. The stories are endless. And while the US government claims these methods were necessary for extracting intelligence, they've left behind a legacy of trauma and shattered lives. One of Guantanamo's most infamous detainees, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, was accused of masterminding the 9/11 attacks. His interrogation? Brutal beyond belief. Transferred to the facility in 2006, he had already endured years of harsh treatment, including repeated waterboarding. The Guantanamo prison only added fuel to the fire, and witnesses later described him as a shadow of his former self, mentally and emotionally shattered by relentless confinement and psychological warfare. But Guantanamo isn't just about punishing the guilty. Over the years, numerous reports have emerged of detainees who were never charged with any crimes. Mohamedou Ould Slahi is one such case. Detained in 2002 under suspicion of terrorism, his harrowing experiences, documented in Guantanamo Diary, reveal the brutal conditions inside the detention center. He endured beatings, sleep deprivation, extreme temperatures, simulated drowning, sexual humiliation, and threats against his family. Forced to stay awake for days while chained in stressful positions, Slahi was subjected to relentless abuse, yet he was never formally charged. Though a federal judge ordered his release in 2010 due to lack of evidence, he remained detained until 2016. But how is all of this even legal? How does a place like this operate without accountability? The answer lies partly in its location. This detention camp, in case you didn't know, is located on a remote and heavily guarded U.S. military installation in southeastern Cuba. The base itself has been under U.S. control since 1903, following the Spanish-American War, under a lease agreement with Cuba that the Cuban government disputes to this day. By placing it on foreign soil, but under American jurisdiction, the U.S. government has argued that Guantanamo exists outside the full reach of domestic laws and international legal frameworks. This means that detainees held here often don't enjoy the constitutional protections afforded within the United States, such as the right to a fair trial or habeas corpus. At the same time, they also lack the safeguards provided by international treaties like the Geneva Conventions, which outline the humane treatment of prisoners of war and other detainees. This legal limbo has been a source of constant criticism, with human rights organizations calling for the camp's closure for years. Efforts to shut it down, though, have been easier said than done. President Obama famously signed an executive order to close Guantanamo in 2009, yet political resistance and logistical challenges kept the camp operational. Today, it holds fewer than 40 detainees, a far cry from the hundreds it housed at its peak, but its legacy continues to loom large, and it's not just the detainees who've suffered. The guards, too, have spoken of the toll Guantanamo takes on everyone who steps inside its gates. High turnover rates, mental health issues, and even suicides among staff have highlighted the psychological cost of working in such an environment. Think we've hit rock bottom with Guantanamo? Not quite. Across the globe, Torah Prison on the outskirts of Cairo, Egypt takes cruelty to a no. Torah Prison. Approaching, one is immediately struck by its imposing structure. High walls topped with barbed wire, guard towers strategically placed with vigilant officers monitoring every movement, and a fortified entrance with multiple checkpoints ensuring that only authorized personnel gain access. Pretty standard for a prison, right? Well, think again, because what happens inside is anything but ordinary. You see, in 1908, Torah Prison was initially constructed to alleviate overcrowding in Cairo's existing detention facilities. Over the years, it expanded into a sprawling complex comprising several sections, each serving a distinct purpose. The main buildings include Torah Agricultural Prison, Torah Lyman, Maximum Security, Torah Istiqbal, Reception, Torah El Makum, and the notorious Torah Supermax, commonly known as Scorpion Prison. Each section is designed to house different categories of inmates, from petty criminals to high-profile political detainees. Entering the prison, the atmosphere shifts dramatically. Inside, the tension hits you immediately. Metal doors clang, guards bark commands, and inmates murmur in low voices. It's unsettling, to say the least. The corridors are narrow and dimly lit, with the occasional flickering bulb casting shadows on the walls. Even the sharp smell of disinfectant can't hide the stifling odors of confinement. The cells are small and sparsely furnished. Inmates sleep on thin mattresses placed on concrete slabs. Personal belongings are minimal, often limited to basic necessities. Overcrowding is a significant issue, and in some instances, inmates have reported being confined in rooms measuring 10 meters by 3 meters, shared with over 38 others. The prison's infrastructure is aging, with many areas showing signs of neglect. Plumbing issues are common, leading to water shortages and unsanitary restroom facilities. Ventilation is poor, making the hot Egyptian summers particularly unbearable for those confined within. The limited access to natural light further adds to the oppressive environment. To fuel the fire, there are also reports from various human rights organizations that have highlighted further numerous abuses within its walls. Torture, both physical and psychological, has been documented. Inmates have recounted experiences of beatings, electric shocks, and prolonged periods of solitary confinement. In some cases, inmates have been subjected to the welcome parade, a form of running the gauntlet where new prisoners are physically and psychologically abused while crawling between two lines of policemen. This practice has been reported in Torah Prison, particularly during the 2019 Egyptian protests. The Scorpion Prison section is particularly infamous. Designed as a supermax facility, it houses some of Egypt's most high-profile detainees, including political prisoners and activists. Inmates in this section are often held incommunicado, with limited access to legal representation or family visits. The cells are more isolated, and the security measures are stringent. Reports indicate that prisoners in Scorpion Prison face even harsher conditions, with some being denied basic necessities like adequate food or medical care. Speaking of medical care, the prison hospital in Torah Prison is notoriously under-equipped and understaffed. Inmates with chronic conditions or those requiring specialized care often face a grim reality. Even when care is technically granted, they rarely receive the treatment they need, leading to worsening health and, in some cases, death. One of the most high-profile inmates of Torah Prison was Mohamed Morsi, Egypt's first democratically elected president. After his removal from office in 2013, Morsi was detained in Scorpion Prison. During his incarceration, significant concerns were raised about his health and the harsh conditions of his detention. Tragically, in 2019, Morsi collapsed during a court session and later died. Many observers linked his death to the extreme conditions and the blatant lack of adequate medical care he endured while imprisoned. Another notable case is that of Alaa Abd el Fattah, a prominent Egyptian activist and blogger. Detained multiple times, Alaa has spent significant periods in Torah Prison. His incarcerations have drawn international attention, with numerous organizations calling for his release and highlighting the dire conditions within the prison. Legal representation for inmates is another significant issue. Many detainees, especially political prisoners, face obstacles in accessing legal counsel. Lawyers often encounter bureaucratic hurdles when attempting to visit their clients, and in some cases, are denied access altogether. Family visits are heavily regulated, and in many cases, restricted. Inmates in sections like Scorpion Prison often go months without seeing their loved ones. When visits are permitted, they are typically brief and conducted under strict supervision. Torah's conditions are horrifying, no doubt, but the title of human slaughterhouse belongs to only one place: Sidah Prison. Sidah Prison. Established in the 1980s, the Sidah Prison in Syria was initially intended for military personnel, but later became a detention center for political prisoners, activists, and anyone perceived as a threat to the regime. Life inside Sidah is a daily struggle for survival. Upon arrival, prisoners face the brutal welcome party, involving severe beatings with various instruments, including electric cables and metal bars. This initiation aims to instill immediate fear and submission. Daily life is marked by extreme overcrowding, with cells designed for a few holding many times their capacity. Prisoners are forced to remain silent. Even whispering can lead to severe punishment. Basic necessities like food, water, and medical care are scarce, leading to malnutrition and untreated illnesses. Torture methods include severe beatings, electric shocks, and stress positions. Sexual violence, including rape, has also been reported. Executions are common, with mass hangings occurring regularly. Sidah is already a place where prisoners are stripped of their humanity. Now imagine being a child predator in a prison this ruthless. One wrong move or even a glance could lead to the kind of suffering that makes you wish you weren't alive. Access to Sidah is highly restricted, with independent monitors and international organizations denied entry. Nevertheless, former detainees play a crucial role in shedding light on the conditions inside. Most organizations have relied heavily on these accounts to compile their reports. Amnesty International's 2017 report, titled Human Slaughterhouse, Mass Hangings and Extermination at Sidah Prison, shed a glaring light on the unspeakable horrors occurring within its walls. Between 2011 and 2015 alone, an estimated 5,000 to 13,000 people were executed here. And if you think these numbers are shocking, consider this. Most of these executions happened in complete secrecy, with no fair trials or due process whatsoever. The report sparked outrage worldwide, yet the response from the international community has been painfully limited. The Syrian conflict itself is a tangled web of competing interests, with major powers involved on opposing sides. This has made any coordinated intervention nearly impossible, leaving the victims at Sidah to suffer in silence. That's it for this video. A glimpse inside the walls themselves that seem to punish those who thought they could harm the innocent. Maybe it's about realizing that some places aren't made for second chances, only consequences. If this video opened your eyes and you're hungry for more, click on the videos displayed on your screen right now. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.